Hello. In an earlier video, I discussed the compressor, the air conditioning compressor, the components that are on it, what it does. Today I'd like to start the installation of the compressor. It's actually a quite simple installation. It would be very simple if we didn't have to do some modifications to the compressor before we installed it. We also have to do a few modifications to the car in order to get it installed as well. Let me review with you a few of those modifications that I probably spoke of earlier, but I'll recap again what they are. What you're looking at here is the left air conditioning compressor. It's not actually mounted on the car yet. I've just got it placed on the car before the installation is done. What I want to do with this is just show you how the positioning of the high pressure switch and the access port for gauges are in the wrong position and why they have to be rotated using a torch. As you can see here, this is the high pressure switch. It's nearly touching this plastic wall. And this access port here for gauges is also rotated in a position where it makes it impossible to hook the gauges up. So what I want to do is to rotate these guys around so that they're facing backwards towards me. And in that earlier video that I gave on the compressor, I believe I described that what I'm doing now in order to accomplish that goal, since the end of the high pressure pipe is in perfect position, we don't want to rotate it. We just need to rotate these two valves here. So what I'm doing is I'm heating up this port out of the pump, lifting this high pressure pipe, the whole thing, out, and placing this pipe into the right compressor. Then I'll remove the high pressure pipe out of the right compressor and place it back into this one. That actually puts these two in almost the perfect alignment. You'll see that as I go along here. The other thing that has to be done, especially on the left side, oftentimes I notice that it's not necessary on the right side. The compressor itself is pushed up against this plastic so that when it starts to run, it'll begin to vibrate. And if, because of those vibrations, it's hitting this wall, it becomes quite noisy. So we don't want to have that noise in addition to the noise, the normal noise of the operating compressor, all at the same time. Passengers inside the car find that intolerable. We have the Zyvan chargers mounting bar that attach right here where this welded on nut is. So we have to push the drain pan and the compressor far enough forward so it clears that, in order that that Zyvan mounting bracket can be placed here without being obstructed by the drain pan. When we do that, it pushes the compressor into the plastic. That's why we have the problem. So what I'll do first is I'll cut out a small portion of the plastic here, and I'll also begin to heat this up, pull it out, and before I actually do the swap between the two compressors, right and left, I'll show you what I've got at that point. So here I've marked out the area that I want to cut out so that the compressor's not vibrating against this plastic wall. I don't have to worry about this being a problem because this is all going to be covered up by the new rear fairing piece that the shuttles have installed on them. So I've got a standard, it's quite windy, so bear with me. I've got a standard angle grinder with a metal cutting bit on it. So I'm just going to pop this out. So that's all that really needs to be taken out. I noticed that on the right side, this is the left side, on the right side, we don't need to have this piece cut out, so I won't bother there. The next step will be to rotate the high pressure lines so that they can be in a usable, accessible position. I'll get started on that now. I've got a small little work area set up here at the back of the vehicle. What I want to make sure that I do before I ever use heat on a compressor or any one of the other AC components is make sure that the nitrogen charge has been released from it. Both of these should be charged with nitrogen. If they're not, it's a good sign they might have a leak, and we need to investigate that a little further. One easy way to release the nitrogen out of the compressor is just by using one of these caps. I have removed this cap from this access port, and you can simply use the ridged tip of it to grab the Schrader valve, and I can now turn that counterclockwise, and you can hear the nitrogen beginning to be released. I'll do that over on this side as well. So both sides appear to have nitrogen. That's a good sign. The other thing that we're going to have to do before we use heat, any amount of heat on these compressors or any of the other components, is make sure that we remove anything from it that might be damaged by that heat. For example, this plastic cap, very close to the area we're going to heat, that should be removed. These Schrader valves inside of these ports, they have little rubber seals. Even though I don't plan to be heating this area, heat is transmitted through this copper very well. And it's very possible, and I've seen it before, where those rubber seals get damaged just by heating it either at this end or this end. So I'll be removing these Schrader valves entirely from this port, this port. I'll also remove the high pressure switch from the line as well. Let me get started doing that. So here I'm removing the Schrader valve from the access port that we would ordinarily hook our gauges to. I'm using the cap to accomplish that. And once it's out, it simply falls out. But you can see that blue seal. I believe that's a silicone seal. That can become pretty deformed if ever it's heated up. And if that does get deformed, it doesn't seal properly, and the AC system can and will leak past that. That'll be a constant source of a leak until it's resolved. So I always like to protect these. When I take them out, I try and put them in someplace safe where they stay clean and safe. I've got a high pressure switch here that I'm preparing to remove also. You can do this with a 12 millimeter and a 14 millimeter wrench. And here it is. Just like with the Schrader valves, I like putting these things someplace safe because they do cost about 20 to 25 bucks each, so they're not cheap. Behind that valve will be another Schrader valve. I'm sorry, behind that switch there'll be another Schrader valve. So we'll take that out also. And there it is. The plastic cap, which could easily get deformed from the heat we're going to use, needs to be removed also. There's a small little rubber washer here. This one's kind of fixed to the cap, so I'm not going to disturb it. Anyway, It's important for that to be there because it seals the nut to the top of the cap, which in addition to this seal, which also has to be removed before we heat it, helps to seal this cap well enough so that no moisture starts to corrode these terminals. Now I've also got here the overload switch. That too could become damaged from the heat. So all these things have to be removed before we heat it up. What I'll do is just connect this small jumper wire back to the overload protector and store it away. So since we're not going to be, at least right now anyway, doing anything heating the low pressure side up, the suction line, we'll leave it alone for now. But later we're going to remove these mechanical fittings. And at that point we'll need to also cut back this insulation, remove this low pressure switch and the Schrader valve behind it. Once we get to that point, we can then remove the mechanical fitting here and the one here. But let's go ahead and take this out, the high pressure, so you guys can get a look at what that looks like.